Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, whatever your time zone. Welcome. This is Digital Transformation Talk, and I am your host, Kevin Crane. Welcome to the show. Now, look, it's no secret that over the last few years, things have really changed. Among other things, it's changed what customers expect. We've all come used to and expect things like remote interactions and connected systems. Customers now expect a seamless and friction-free experience. And for organizations today, if you provide that experience, you win. But if you stay stuck in the past and you're a hassle or frustrating to work with, your customers will simply move on to the competition. Now, for example, recently my wife and we refinanced our home. Originally, we had our mortgage loan with one of those big banks, you know, the ones here in America. But honestly, just getting the ball rolling was a big hassle. We had to talk to multiple people, hassle through multiple steps in the process. And in the end, we ended up exiting that process and going with one of the more modern, mobile-enabled mortgage lenders. And I got to tell you, I was skeptical at first, but the process was way less painful and way more quick. Much of the process was remote. Some of it was automated, perhaps. But the people that we did interact with were great and prepared, and they were connected. They were connected with the data. They were connected with the service. And the process was really pretty painless. On top of that, I think we got a better rate to boot. So a better rate, better service. Now that is changing customer experience and customer expectations with something as complicated and formal as a mortgage. Other processes are changing as well. How we buy a car, for example, how we purchase clothing or groceries, how we interact with government agencies or commercial agencies. They're all evolving quickly, and organizations are changing because they have to. Well, some anyway. Others, like that big legacy bank, may be at risk at becoming antiquated simply because customers will find other providers that provide a superior experience. And that's what we're here to talk about today, a new age in improved customer experience and how to provide superior customer experience with your customers and constituents. What digital transformation technologies and approaches can help. How can we put those pieces together to not only react to changing expectations from customers and indeed society today, but also how to move the needle in ways that we use information and technology and processes to be superior in the service that we provide and the way that our organization works. So stand by for another great discussion today with another great panel of guests. But before I introduce our guests today and get to our news item, I do want to say that we want to hear from you too. We'd like to encourage each and every one of you attending today to participate. After all, we're a big community of practitioners and experts here. So please join in with your comments in the chat section. And if you have a question along the way for our guests, please enter them into the Q&A feature, and I will be working to get them into the flow of the show. And we may even have a few minutes also at the end for your questions. So with that, I'd like to introduce our guests today, starting with Aaron Cosentino. Aaron is Chief Technology Officer for the City of Elgin. And Deanna Petrova is joining us today. She is Vice President of Digital and Marketing for Trafalgar Travel. And also joining us is Rocky Martinez, Global Chief Technology Officer at SmartStream Technologies. Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you being here today. Aaron, I assume you're calling in from Elgin, Illinois, near Chicago. Is that right?
That's right. Calling in from Elgin. We are a suburb 30 miles west of Elgin, 115,000 people, sixth largest city in Illinois. Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Aaron. I've been to Chicago, not Elgin. I hope to get there. Deanna Petrova. Deanna, you are calling in from London. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Central London. So, hi, everyone.
Welcome aboard. Thank you, Deanna, for being with us. And Rocky, where are you calling in from?
Calling from the lovely state of New Jersey. The part-time office, and then our offices are actually down on Wall Street. So I spent time there as well.
All right. Well, we once again are spanning the globe. I'm coming to you from the West Coast of the United States here in Portland, Oregon. So welcome, everybody. We are here to talk about customer experience and digital transformation. And so to get our discussion started today, I'd like to point us to an article from Forbes, recently published on Forbes recently, titled Becoming a Customer Company. And the article explores a customer experience-driven business transformation. It was written by futurist and technologist Brian Solis, and Brian's article for Forbes points us to some research conducted by Harvard that shows that customer experience is a top 5 business priority today. But Brian warns us that most companies aren't there yet. In fact, not even close. Harvard found that only 16% of customer experience-driven companies have a single view or a 360-degree view of their customers. In other words, a holistic view of customers and customer information. And organizations often lack the organizational structure to really make use of that information and those insights. Now, this is a great panel to discuss this. Rocky's deep into the technologies. Aaron is coming from a government and constituent point of view, and Deanna is deeply in touch with customers and customer experience in the travel industry. So I'll put it all to you. What about this gap? What is your take on this gap between the need to provide superior customer experience and the reality of actually being able to do so? Why the gap?
I'll let
Anyway,
Deanna go first.
Okay, thank you. No,
Yeah.
thank you for that. I think as you were talking, I was actually thinking probably one of the gaps is so rarely do we truly see a customer experience functions in a lot of these organizations that is truly defined and actually sits across the different data collection points, if I can call that. One of the challenges, I think, to become a truly customer-centric organization is because we're shifting from this traditional model of, sales is here and a call center here, and then you have online here, and everybody's kind of in their own little data silo doing their thing. And then that holistic view as to what happened on the website, translating into the call center, translating into another department, and the actual experience, and so on and so forth. There's so many different data points that are sitting still very siloed without anybody putting them together and looking from end to end what to do with them. So I think this is one of, at least for me, one of the challenges that we see from a B2C kind of perspective at the moment.
So the connective tissue between the systems, people, and the information is really what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Aaron,
exactly.
what's your take on?
Oh,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please.
No, I was just going to say it's similar in capital markets where customers of those large banks, especially in capital markets, they use different types of data to get into their accounts and to do capital market functions like trading or shorting or stock loan. So they all use different identifiers, and there is a huge friction in our market right now because these identifiers they cause friction. So as Deanna was saying, someone may do a trade using one identifier, but now they break downstream because all those identifiers aren't setting up, and the big banks, like Deanna also said, are very siloed. So my function does it this way, and another function does it this way, and there's no understanding that at the end of the day, the customer is the most important because they're the one that's providing the revenue. And until somebody figures that out, we'll keep having this friction until that's settled and everybody understands that the customer does need to drive the experience.
So it's not the technology that's in the way. Again, it's sort of that connective tissue, the holistic approach to the process as a whole.
Yes.
Aaron, you're with the city of Elgin.
Yeah.
What's your take on this gap between the need to provide superior service, customer experience, and the technologies and the processes to get it done?
From a governmental perspective, I think that, we're in a unique position because everyone's a resident of a city or a municipality or a suburb, what have you. Some are much older than others, but all of them have generational data that they've had to bring forward over decades. I mean, the city of Elgin was founded in 1854, right? So we have hundreds of years worth of historical records, property information, resident information that we have to continually scale into the digital world. And so we have many of these legacy systems that house a lot of our customer data, resident data, that when a new technology comes out and people have these expectations to be able to have that at their fingertips or do self-service, there's that expectation for governments to have that there, to have that 360-degree view. And you'd be amazed at the number of governments throughout the United States, at least, that don't operate with a CRM that don't have a way to centrally track those interactions.
How are you approaching that, Aaron, as you go along? Some of these, this information, some of these documents go way back. Have you digitized everything, or are you digitizing along the way? What is your digitization strategy?
So for the most part, there is a pretty clear demarcation between like that's an archived record, right? And so you have these long-term scanning projects that we have those digitized that go way back. But when it comes to certain plans, engineering plans, these large-scale plan sets that come in with developments, those still remain on paper, and so sometimes it's a mixed bag. And when a research project comes in or a Freedom of Information Act request comes in for records, it involves a lot of staff time to do both the digital research and then the paper-based research. Now, the city is lucky and fortunate. We did implement our CRM more than a decade ago, and so I think we're well ahead of other municipalities, so that for the most part, recent interactions with the city are all in one place, so that there is that single pane of glass.
Well, let's talk about the effect to customer experience and superior experience. The article goes on to point to research from Salesforce that found that 85% indeed, most customers expect consistent interactions across departments and people and process when they deal with companies, agencies, and service providers. I guess that's no surprise, but research also shows that the majority of customers, about 60%, feel that they are not communicating with one company. And indeed, 66% say that most often they have to repeat or re-explain or reiterate information to different representatives at different steps along the way. And this friction and frustration makes a big impact on market share and market perception. Most people simply move on to the competition. In fact, 71% reported switching brands in the last year alone because of poor customer experience. So I'll put it out to the group again. What can we do about that? Each of you has a slightly different perspective on this. From your point of view, how are you folks using digital transformation to boost that service and eliminate those gaps, that friction in the process?
Well, I'll just go first. So the biggest thing we're doing as an organization and as products out is making the data accessible. So one of the issues is that some of those legacy systems are sitting in these kind of siloed databases and they don't interact, right? So that's why it sounds like a different company, because the call center may have one type of database and then the sales enablement may have another type of database. They're not all talking from the same hymn book, so to speak. So what we're doing organizationally is that all of our data is accessible through REST APIs, which makes every application see the same data. And what we sell is the ability for customers to actually have that ability to create the 360 view of that capital markets data, all from the same place, but with different ways of looking at it. So if I'm looking at it from a call center, I may call it a certain way. And then if I'm calling from sales enablement, I'm calling it another way. So the way in is different, but the data is the same. This way, everybody sees the same without the organization, without having the heavy lifting of creating all these databases all over the place. So what it comes down to is make it easily accessible technology so that the business people can do their jobs. I mean, that's what we're doing.
Deanna, what's your experience at Trafalgar?
Yeah, I'll just add on to exactly what Rocky is saying. I think the legacy systems are probably one of the biggest challenge to having the same data for different departments. It's also system access, because different departments need different systems, and then you can have one view versus another. So you would see in a lot of travel companies, I think sometimes when you look at the footers of some of the emails where you would see your points or loyalty status or whatever it is, says like data as accurate of, let's say, 72 hours or something like that, because a lot of these old systems run scheduled jobs rather than real live, like kind of real-time APIs. So it would be, let's say, a pull every 24 hours or something like that. So let's say you made a booking or a cancellation, or you've just had a flight or something like that. You would always, if you receive an email or something like that, would be with the data from, let's say, anything from 24 to 72 hours backwards. So it might not be as accurate. So I think, again, within Trafalgar and any of the previous travel companies I've actually worked with, a lot of focus has been on interconnecting and updating this real-time view of data, because travel is very dynamic as well. Like what's been happening like today, tomorrow, like is very different. Like customer behavior just changes. You want to go here, you want to go there, you want to change, you want to add or amend, upgrade. Like there's so many options that happen as well, especially pre-trip, which, like this is where you just need to make sure your data is so accurate. And if you have this delay, it actually creates quite a lot of, calls into the call centers and so on and so forth. But again, I think there is quite a lot of work still to make sure systems run in real time rather than with some delays, at least from my experience.
So one 360 view of customer data and in real time, and that sounds straightforward but difficult to do. Aaron, what are you folks doing at Elgin, in the city of Elgin, to address this?
Well, that's where the movement to the cloud is huge for governments. So many of our legacy systems in local government were on premise, just out of necessity. We needed a place to store financial information. Our ERP systems are oftentimes, legacy-based systems that weren't cloud-based or enabled to be able to communicate via API. And so when we have to make these upgrades, we need to be thinking about the movements to the cloud to something that is versatile enough to communicate. And so that's, I think, where some of this gap is, and the public sector is finding and connecting those systems via API or via some sort of real-time integration. I think that's where a lot of the missing data is. It's housed somewhere that isn't immediately available.
API integration, this is what Rocky was just mentioning a minute ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, cities now need to become also tiny little software companies, because there is an expectation that we maintain apps, that we maintain online portals that need to be almost as good as what we see in the private sector, because
Right.
there's the customer expectation. They interact with these behemoths like Amazon or what have you, and their customer experience is so streamlined. There's that expectation on the government side where our resources are much lower, and our priorities certainly may shift based on political wins or what's going on in the community. So it's not always top of mind for decision makers and policymakers to put digital experience at the forefront. But we face that pressure too. And then it's even more interesting because our market is segmented. Some residents are very tech savvy and want that self-service option. Some residents are resistant. We as a city have to serve that full gradient of people who want everything done for them, won't even set up an email address, to the folks that are like, I want to create an app that uses city data. So we have a tremendously wide market that we have to serve and think of their needs. And when we think of like customer first, or being that customer and going through that experience, our customers want so many different things. It's a challenge, I think, for governments to find that happy medium.
Well, and we mentioned earlier the move to the changing customer expectations. I think are probably very present for you, Aaron, because you're right. If I interact with my mortgage company, or a big behemoth, as you put it, and I'm totally used to this sort of digital remote interaction, and then I go to the city, and if I expect the same sorts of service, but I imagine the city doesn't have the resources and the infrastructure that some of the
Sometimes we don't. Sometimes we don't. Elgin's lucky enough that we are moving towards that, but no one is perfect by any stretch, and so there are some things that are still paper-based within the city of Elgin too. And so that's one of the things, you have to start somewhere, and I think that that's an important part of this. Take some small steps forward and begin this transformation. It's certainly not a overnight type of a transformation.
And Deanna, have you seen the same transition in terms of customer expectations in your industry?
Oh, absolutely. I think with us, definitely, we're very much compared to the Amazon experience, especially, in travel. Not only Amazon, but obviously you have the booking.coms and Airbnbs, where they entered kind of the travel sphere, which is slightly more traditional industry, like a lot of it prior to to these giants entering and becoming like a dominant power within travel. It was a little bit more traditional, and then it revolutionized what the consumer expects actually from an easy transition and conversion, data research, all these bits and bobs that before I guess the expectation was a little bit lower. Now it's like very much you would want a 2-click kind of find a product, convert. Like they literally would not want to have a longer journey than that, which I think, to Aaron's point, when you are moving from a traditional setup into a more digital setup, takes time to get there. I think the vision and the appetite is there, but it takes time and resource and so on and so forth. So it's not necessarily an immediate setup that can change, but obviously we've been moving towards it, and we've made huge strides into getting into that 2-click pathway. But yeah, it's very interesting how people's expectation changed, and post-COVID as well, during the pandemic and kind of after it, was even more that there is that immediacy of I want something and it has to happen in the minute, here and now, and so on and so forth. So yeah, definitely similar.
We are here with Deanna Petrova, Rocky Martinez, and Aaron Cosentino. We're talking about a new age in customer experience and how digital transformation plays into that. If you have a question or comment for our panel today, please feel free to enter it into the chat feature or the Q&A feature, and we'll be working to try to get those into the discussion today. Vincent, thank you for your comment about curious to know how public bodies handle their transition to the cloud. And Aaron, looks like we got to that subject. So thank you, Vincent, for your comment today. Keep them coming.
Slowly.
Now, I want to move on to new technologies, new approaches to transform customer experience and really foster customer-centric connections and conversations. And certainly when we talk about new technology, it would be remiss to not bring up something along the lines of ChatGPT and generative AI that is now hitting the news and hitting our society and our technologies today. What is your take on ChatGPT and the like? Aaron, are you folks planning in the city to leverage ChatGPT or generative AI in any kind of way?
Yeah, so ChatGPT it's an extraordinary, I think, leap forward from the conversational standpoint. We've all experienced chatbots that have been frustrating and really not helpful. I think that model, those chatbots are just going to fall by the wayside extremely quickly here with what is now going to be available through these conversational AIs, and then just the competition that comes out against ChatGPT or what have you. So that's going to take that customer experience a tremendous step forward. Now, the city of Elgin, from an AI perspective, we're already utilizing machine learning and AI for things like street conditions, sign surveys. Think of Google Street View, but with a LiDAR layered over it, so we can do sidewalk inspections. We can see the status and the good or the bad of our roads. And so that's taking a tremendous strain and kind of eliminating the need for those humans to go out and do those. And so I think that over time, we're going to see just more and more of the Internet of Things. You have, red light cameras, street cameras everywhere. We have over 500 cameras throughout the city. So we have that real-time information center that we're using. So we're looking at a lot of things always and looking to implement those to make it more efficient for us to maintain the infrastructure. Because customer experience aside, cities also have to maintain roads, bridges, underground utilities, street poles, street signs, stop signs, all of those things. And so that's, I think, where AI has been a huge help to the public sector. Now, getting into the customer experience, customer service side, things like ChatGPT, I think, are just, again, going to be completely disruptive to be able to maybe scrape a knowledge base and conversationally answer residents' questions that maybe a call center would do in the past. I think we're going to finally be able to get to that point where people are comfortable talking to a machine and not having to be frustrated.
Well, talk about customer experience, Aaron. If you can help me get through red lights in heavy traffic times, I mean, that's an experience that I have of the city. It
Yeah.
may or may not be directly related, but it's certainly what I kind of expect from my city. Good roads, nice, flowing traffic, that kind of thing is also a customer experience, really.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, we already have on some level reactive roads that will, change the lights depending on the traffic or who's waiting at that light. I mean, but that's old technology, right? That's been around for decades. I could certainly see sort of a brand new world where roads are a lot more responsive to demand. On accident detection, for instance, there may be a time where when an accident occurs, a street light or a red light hears that and alerts the police right away. We will get to a point where people won't need to call 911 because the infrastructure surrounding it will be responsive.
Jonathan here has a comment or a question. I'd like to put it out to the group. Jonathan says, and thank you, Jonathan. Speaking of ChatGPT, I'd be curious to know the panel's take on using ChatGPT as a Google-like search engine without explainability, especially since most of the references and sources it provides usually return with 404s. Rocky, what's your take on that?
So I saw that. One of my problems with ChatGPT, because I'm a part-time academic, is that it gives you this information, but it doesn't give you the reference. And what we thought of ChatGPT is to start providing the ability to get capital markets data real time, so that if somebody says, what is the stock price of IBM, ChatGPT then could use our REST APIs to get that information at real time and provide the reference, right? And that's the easiest out there. Most people understand what I just said. I mean, there's other things that have to happen that ChatGPT could be used for, but it needs to have more real-time information so that it becomes useful to not just so I had a colleague who for Valentine's Day today had his wife's Valentine's note written for him, and it was done beautifully. And we all said, you're in trouble because she knows you don't write like that. But that's another conversation. But it goes back to the explainability part that it is a leap forward, but especially in today's day and age, you need to know the references, and you need to have real-time references if you're going to use it for capital markets or banking or anything like that, because that information, needs to be audited, regulated, and you need to be able to provide something that's not from 10 years ago, but from 10 seconds ago. So it does provide an engine. That engine needs to just become better at getting the data into the realm where it's usable by more than just someone trying to write a note to his wife on Valentine's Day.
All right. Well, I want to move on from ChatGPT, but I do want to ask Deanna, what's your take on ChatGPT? I can imagine there might be some great opportunity there for you in your industry, the travel industry.
Yeah, I think we're very excited. And now I guess everybody who is on here is going to be checking their Valentine's cards against any web references to see who's gotten the real deal and who's gotten ChatGPT creation. But I think from a travel perspective, I think you guys mentioned in the beginning the frustration with chatbots, right? And the legacy of how you would go in and you will be excited you can chat to someone or something on a website, and then it's this really underwhelming experience that usually you're met with, which doesn't really end up resolving your challenge or question or whatever it is. And I think from a travel point of view, a creation like ChatGPT is really exciting, because although we haven't tried it or we haven't integrated it yet, and we're obviously watching with intent as to what's happening out there with its implementation into a more kind of mainstream function, I think it will be amazing to implement it into travel, to be able to communicate, and for that chatbot function to actually be useful, and for you to truly be able to get a conversation going and get something more in depth. Because I feel, At the moment, pretty much chatbots and even ChatGPT, of course, it's as good as the input that you provide it with. And I think there is that aspect that with chatbots in the past, like the language and the actual questions that have been said there have not been encompassing enough to mimic human behavior and human thought processes and so on and so forth. So that's why you don't get very far with it. Well, I guess the hope with ChatGPT is that it's going to be able to, after some learning, take you on that journey, because it's going to be able to, understand where you're going, what are you trying to ask, and it's not like that precise match as current chatbot. So for travel, that's an endless opportunity to, I think Aaron's point is something that a call center could have done before. Like probably now you can cut all these, let's say, questions that come in that can be answered easily without you having to talk to a human. But otherwise, maybe you can't find online or you just don't know. So I think it's definitely an exciting change, and we'll look intently to what happens with it and how we can utilize it.
Vincent says, no need to brainstorm ideas for my Valentine love letter. You're a good man, Vincent. I may be, I don't know. I may be logging on here after this. All right. Now, I want to talk about the role of data in all of this. Data, technology, and people, I think, are the three big cornerstones of digital transformation. When it comes to using data and advanced data analytics for improved products that enhance customer experience, where are you folks at with that? I mean, how are you folks really leveraging the data that you have today to provide a more superior customer experience? Anyone?
Well, from a governmental perspective, again, I'll jump in. It's interesting. Folks will readily discuss their deepest, darkest secrets with Google or something like ChatGPT. But when it comes to giving the government any sort of personal information, we have folks that are kind of opposed to that fundamentally. So we have, like I said before, a full panoply of different acceptances of providing the government information. Now, thankfully, we, with our CRM, are able to collect that and at least be responsive from a service level. So we'll know when people call in about a stop sign, or about a code complaint, or about a permit inquiry. We have that information. But when it comes to maintaining the quality of that information, it does get tough. People have a lot of different email addresses. How do you find that unique identifier when sometimes they're trying to disguise who they are, right? Because when you're interacting with a city, you might be making a complaint about your neighbor. You don't want that in our system. So some folks are actually trying to conceal that. So the quality of data and finding duplicates is a huge issue that we go through on a daily basis. We have automated duplicate checkers within our CRM. So we're trying to make that as seamless as possible for folks when they log in. I want them to see all of their past cases, but sometimes that really is a challenge. So what we've actually done from the city standpoint is we've put the parcel at our very top level of our hierarchy. So everything is more or less location based within the city of Elgin. So within the city, we have all of our different parcels, all of our addresses, and people change, people move, but the parcels stay. So we use that as a customer actually within our CRM to kind of track those interactions too.
Well, it's all about having good data. And Rocky, I know we were talking about this earlier. Good data equals good decisions, good strategies. What's your take on using advanced data analytics for improved?
Yeah. So what we do and what we're actually going to keep building on is that many different providers provide the same type of instrument. So what that means is there are certain vendors out there that provide different data for IBM, and they all use different identifiers, and a customer wants to be able to kind of have that as one big unified view. So what we do is we use advanced analytics to make sure that all of those different types, all those different vendors who have the same type or the same address, like Aaron was saying, we put them all together so that our customers can see what that IBM looks like at every other type of vendor. And as you can tell, it gets very complicated because everybody has different types of ways of representing data. So we have certain models that go and look and say, hey, this is 3 apples, this has 3 apples and a pineapple and 3 apples and a banana. Well, the 3 apples are the same, so let's just put them together and we'll deal with the banana and the pineapple. And we're getting better as we get more and more data through it. It's getting better and better. So the thing that we learned is you're not going to be great in the beginning, but you have to have patience and wait, because it does get better as time moves on. And then you get closer to that 100. You never get 100, but if you get moved closer and closer every time that runs, you get much, much better data, which then gives you accurate data, cleansed data, which is what keeps customers happy, right? Because now you unify it, you give it good access, everybody gets to see it, and people will want to come back and deal with that, because now they don't have to deal with 10 vendors, they deal with one, and then they get a clean view. But that has to be done with models. It can't be done by a human.
And Deanna, quickly, what's your take on it? How are you folks using data analytics at Trafalgar for superior experience for customers?
Well, I'm going to put my hand up. As a marketer, we love hoarding data, right? Like from different sources. Just give us a survey or something to get a few more bits and bobs. And I think through the years, we have collected a lot of data from different touch points. But going back to our original kind of discussion, it does sit a little separate. So if you look at our CRM, it has a lot of relational tables, and sometimes the relationships are not necessarily as clear path as we would want them to be. Again, going back to the fact, like having one unique identifier. Unlike Aaron, we don't have an issue with people not telling us who they are, but just sometimes, for example, we would have a family account, but then there are 2 to 3 to 4 people on it, and they all have different experiences, but they're all under one email address, for example. And this is where some of the challenges would come from all the data that we've gathered. We now are unsure, for example, is this John or is this Sally, or who actually is the person we're talking to, because the email might be, family X or whatever it is, but it's ultimately multiple people. So I just think, we do gather a lot of it, and we have focused a lot of our efforts in the past couple of years of actually streamlining this data and just making sure it's actually correlated correctly. So we know who these people are, we know what they're telling us, we know what their purchasing behavior is, and we can also talk to them about relevant, products and so on and so forth. And ultimately, obviously, we would love to be able to give them accurate recommendations for what they can go on to enjoy, because we do actually know, well, if you've been here, you would probably enjoy this type of product, or you would probably enjoy this destination. So we have that knowledge, but actually creating the model on top of the data to show us that in real time in an automated way is kind of where our utopia view, I think, is at the moment. But as I said, we do like to collect the data, so we have plenty of it to go off from.
Right. Do you feel that gives you a competitive advantage, having that data and then really utilizing in ways that matter?
You know what? I think a lot of companies have the data, because looking at my personal experience online, I think a lot of companies focus on gathering. I think it's exactly that bit of figuring out how to use it afterwards is where the competitive advantage lies. And I would hope to think that we are getting there, and it is giving us an advantage by us being strategic about how we use the data. But I guess time will tell, because again, this is something that takes quite some time to, put in practice. And
All right. We do have some questions, and I want to get to some of our audience questions here in just a few remaining minutes that we have. William is asking, as we strive to improve the customer constituent partner experience through digitization and modernization, what about the regulatory aspects of data governance, GDPR, for example, and similar compliance requirements? Anyone have a quick take on that?
Yeah, so especially around, I think this was brought up around Chat GPT as well, right? So GDPR requires for you to delete data once a customer says, I don't want you to hold it anymore. It's one of the tenets. So what we've done to make sure that happens is that you actually have to start tagging data with an owner, which is not an easy process. And you have to make sure that those tags are maintained and there's governance around what belongs to who. because there is a gray area if the company owns it or if the customer owns it, and it takes effort to tag it, and then have the ability to actually go through all your databases and your document stores to get rid of anything that's tagged. So you have to build your applications in a way that once that data comes in, it constantly stays tagged so that you don't lose who's the actual owner of it. And it has to be done up front. If you try to go backwards, it can be done. It just, you multiply your expenses. Okay. So the point there is you have to think about it from day one, not day 10.
Another question from Jonathan. In addition to current digital trends, including 24/7 online availability and seamless omni-channel experience, what other steps can we take as an enterprise to personalize the digital customer experience and improve overall customers' commitment and value? Anyone have a thought on that real quick?
I think, yeah, just real quick. People like collecting things. They like gamification, badges, kind of having that VIP status. So any way you can put transparency around that and give people, awards for participation or a badge for or a special offer for engaging with a survey, something like that, just kind of to make it fun and make them feel like they're special is probably a good way to do it.
Yeah, I just want to add on to this one just a little bit, because I think this is such an important point. It's actually not only thinking about what your organization can do and so on and so forth, but actually giving something special to that customer, using that data for them to truly feel seen and understood, going down towards like being not about personalization and so on and so forth, but actually like seeing the individual like in front of the screen, to say, like not in front of you, but like, recognizing that. I think that would take you very far from a loyalty perspective, because people really appreciate that.
All right. Well, we are running out of time. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. Vincent and others, thank you so much for your interaction today and for being part of the discussion. I do want to get to my last question for each of our panelists, and this is the action item round. I'm wondering if each of you could provide us with just 60 seconds, a quick action item, a bullet point suggestion that we can use to take advantage of the ideas and advice that we've talked about today. Rocky, let's start with you. 60 seconds. What's your action item?
So my action item is make the data accessible, make sure it's cleansed, and make sure it's accurate, right? So if you can get those three, it'll never be 100, but if you can get those going, your experience is going to be holistic and cross organizations, and you'll look like one company.
Aaron, let's go to you too. 60 seconds. What's your action item round for us today?
Find and recruit talent that is very well versed in API and integrations of systems.
All right, very good. And Deanna, we have saved the best for last. Deanna, what's your take on give us a quick action item for us today?
I think I'll build a little bit on Rocky's points, and it's like when you gather data, just make sure you use it. You don't just gather it for the sake of it, because I think customers hate to repeat themselves, and that would definitely win you points in the loyalty game and the experience game.
All right, very good. That is Deanna Petrova, Vice President of Digital and Marketing for Trafalgar Travel. We have been also joined by Aaron Cosentino, Chief Technology Officer for the City of Elgin, and of course, Rocky Martinez, Global Chief Technology Officer for Smart Stream Technologies. Aaron, Deanna, Rocky, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate your comments.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, very good. Well, that will bring us to a close of another great episode of Digital Transformation Talk. Join us next week, every Tuesday at 1600 GMT. Next week, we will be talking about driving a shift in talent and culture towards digital technology. It should be another great discussion. So please tune in with us again next week. And if you'd like to find me, you can do so at LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect there, and check out my weekly podcast, the Digital Transformation Podcast. But otherwise, that'll do it for this episode of Digital Transformation Talk. For DTT Hunter and myself, until next week, I'm Kevin Crane. Thank you so much for watching.